area designed and then that is through a state or federal permitting process.
But probably in the literature, someone's studied it.
Yeah, yes, it's in the literature, and it's shown that because of the induced switch in speciation and community structure of the phytoplankton, you have about a 6 to 6 month lag before the zooplankton actually exceeds the biomass and the number, and usually larger forms, which are more available for planktivorous fish. And then it's usually a 3 to 12 month lag in the benthic invertebrate before you see that rain down organic switch that you get a better diversity if the system oxygen demand is such that that's driven by the algal blooms. If it's already built up to the point where you're anaerobic in the sediments, you're not going to see a change in benthos because you're not changing the oxygen dynamics.
As a layperson, again, I'll say, if you were proposing to use an aluminum sulfate treatment done well, so you didn't screw up the pH, would you have a concern about the effect of that on the fishery? Or is there lots of experience where that's been done in a lake where the fishery survived and prospered?
Kind of where they started out, where all these alum treatments came from was the Clean Lakes program. And the way they funded the Clean Lakes program in the 70s when EPA was formed, they put a bunch of money into that. They had what's called a phase 1 study, a phase 2 study, and then an implementation study. So, and then tracking. So for 10 or 15 years, all these aluminum sulfate treatments, that if that was the recommendation to go into this lake, they had funding to study that really extensively. I think that's kind of what you were quoting from the
Yeah, if you apply it correctly, your net effect on the eutrophication of the lake is to turn it back. So you have a more balanced system and the whole system responds appropriately. Like I say, if you don't change the character of the sediments and it's still a very anoxic sediment, you don't see the benthic invertebrates respond in kind as fast. That takes a long time to burn up those organics. But basically, in terms of fishery, it's a positive response.
Awesome.
This also now. Peters.
All right. So the next part of today, probably one of our most important parts, is setting goals and measuring success with Pigeon Lake. So we moved an awful lot of information past you today. Talked about the history of the lake. We talked about the studies that have been done on the lake. We know what we know. We've got a good handle on that. We also know what we don't know. And that's probably going to drive a lot of what we're going to get to this afternoon and for tomorrow. Managing expectations is certainly going to be a big part of this exercise. I think we need to have a conversation around that. Obviously, we're looking at a place-based approach, so we can't suddenly imagine that we're going to get back to a shield-type lake. So we in this room need to be very cognizant of that, and as we're talking to others about how we're going to move forward with this, managing that expectations with our public is also extremely important. What is possible? You know, is it going to be like Al's Point, Pine Lake example, a return to 1900? Are we going to get to that magic, get under 10 milligrams per liter? Is that even possible? You know, is it possible to get and keep us under 30 micrograms per liter of TDP, or TP rather? Are we looking at bloom control? Is it bloom management? Do we want to completely eliminate blooms in the lake, or do we want to be able to say that we're going to have blooms, you know, 2 or 3 times every 10 years? You know, what's the win going to be, I guess, for this group? Obviously, we need to let a phosphorus budget guide our efforts, and need to be aware of the snake oil salesman. And I think the Pigeon Lake group's probably earned all of its stripes in the snake oil department. I think you've seen and heard just about everybody that sells everything from straw bales to floating devices on the water. I don't want to name any names, but I think the Pigeon Lake group's been in touch with us about everything that there is to be in over the last 10 years. So you've earned your stripes there. So I'm going to turn it back over to the floor for some discussion around that. Like what are your restoration goals? what do we want to see? I mean, we want to see a healthy fishery, we want to have healthy recreational opportunities. We're not, are we going to eliminate algal blooms in the lake? Do we want to minimize them? What's the goal here, I guess? What do we want to target?
I guess I can start that off, and that's prior to 2006 when we had that bloom, I didn't receive any calls about the water quality of Pigeon Lake, despite the fact that chlorophyll levels were still kind of what they were in 2006 and beyond. Back in the 80s and 90s, talking to Pat Mitchell too, that there wasn't calls of concern about it. So it's the frequency and intensity of the blooms that's been occurring in recent years. So if we can reduce it down to pre-2006 conditions, I think most of the people on the lake will be happy. Paleontology, as I said, will provide some more realistic expectations of what that lake was like historically prior to any kind of European settlement or European development in the area. But overall, I think most people around the lake are probably accepting of, well, yes, the lake, it is naturally productive, it is going to be somewhat green, but if we can at least, well, like you were talking about, have so that it's not posted for half the open water season by Alberta Health or technology, I think people would be okay with that.
I think that's, speaking as a resident of the lake, someone, I'm a user of the lake, our goal is to optimize the recreational value of Pigeon Lake. And that goes to inlay treatments that assure us that we don't have it posted or cautioned as a recreational opportunity. And therefore, what we need is a treatment capability to make certain that we don't get blooms of blue-green algae. And if we do, that we have a method of treating them that isn't done by a harvester of some kind. Which I thought the best harvester I'd ever seen was in China, where about 75 or 80 guys were in a canal carrying the blue-green algae out by hand. And that frankly astounded me. I believe that what I've seen today with the kind of treatments with aluminum sulfate or Ozlock or whatever that could assure us of a clean appearing lake where we've got a usable recreational lake, I think are what we're looking for. I have to say, my own conclusion is that given the size of the lake, anything that would envision removal of the nutrients with the sediment, that is dredging of any form, I think is probably very, very unlikely to be economic within any use. Even though it's shallow, it just doesn't make sense. So if that's a reiteration, I'd say I'd say we share the view as people that use the lake. We share the view with the department of what should be the target.
We want to tie our indicators of success to fish kills and eliminating fish kills or minimizing fish kills.
My view, and I think that we've had very little work done by anybody on the nature of fish kills. I think they're virtually unrelated to this question of nutrients in the lake. I think that the fish kills has got to do with management of the fisheries, and until somebody does some analysis of the fish kills as they occur, we are purely speculating as to cause and effect. But I'm overwhelmed with the personal knowledge that we never, ever, ever saw whitefish that big in the lake years ago, and we had a very, I just don't see the relationship between phosphorus in the lake and and these fish kills. And Chris has shown us that the water temperature, we're not seeing massive variation on the years that we've had fish kills going on for a few years now. And last year, for sure, we had a very healthy lake most of the time, still had a fish kill.
Was there any necropsy work done in any of the fish kills? Like, were we able to specifically identify thermal or oxygen stress? Does anybody know?
There hasn't been. I did talk with our disease expert that we look at implementing that this some of you experienced with fish. I guess the issue there is timing and the uncertainty of when the actual fish are dying. There's a delayed response. And
You don't all die the same day, so when we get the first indication that a fish dying, you can monitor from then on and get them as fresh as you want.
Well, not necessarily. This past year, yeah, it was, there'd be fish floating for about a month and a half period. Again, they drift based on the wind conditions. There doesn't seem to be any localized spot where they appear to be all dying. They obviously drift into the shoreline space in the southwest corner, usually on Manway Beach because of the prevailing winds. So, the difficulty is collecting fresh samples that can be adequately tested or determine the cause of
Well,
death.
you mean that haven't been floating?
Yes. So the uncertainty is when the fish die, if they sink to the bottom, rest there for a day or two, become buoyant, and then float to the surface, that's too long a period of time. And then to adequately test determine the cause of death. There is some information that it may be secondary responses, looking at bacterial on the gills, monomers, bacteria, that we'll be looking for is
No.
If I may, just on that topic, sorry to interrupt, but I think there was 147,000 pounds of fish in 1 year and over 400,000 pounds of fish in another. That was somewhat correct. And it'd be really nice if we could get those fish netted and to a useful use rather than just going into the dump.
Yeah, well, we've had a commercial fishery reopen on the lake the past 4 years now. It's been running actually the last 3 weeks. It closed last Friday. Again, we only have 31 commercial license holders. And again, with the quota of 50,000 kgs, they're hard pressed to actually harvest that many at a given time. Not all those license holders are attending the fishery. We can't force them to show up and harvest the fish. So it's up to those individuals as to whether or not they want to participate in that fishery. We provide the opportunity, but again, it's up to those license holders.
So then this is a piece that we don't hear, is that it is open, they are able to net, but nobody's taking the bump on it, so the fish are available.
They are. Again, it's a balancing of, okay, we're going to need to maintain healthy fish numbers, but we can't predict on any given year how many fish are going to die in the summer. We could see into the magic ball and say, yes, we're going to have a fish kill of 100,000 pounds of whitefish. Yes, we could harvest them. We're looking for options to harvest them in the winter time. Again, not knowing that, if we implement those measures and over-harvest, then we run into the situation where we get depressed populations. That affects the other predatory fish populations, which, for the walleye fishery there, attracts a number of anglers. It's probably one of our most popular summertime recreational fisheries, and again, that brings economic activity as well. So there's those trade-offs to consider. So. And we have a domestic fishery there too, in terms of First Nations providing food for subsistence purposes, which is also taken into consideration. So.
And if you want to consider biomanipulation, you really don't want to remove the walleye and the pike. You want to keep those top predators in the system to remove the smaller like Tiburon's fish.
Well, and even with the whitefish fishery in terms of population structure, if we look back in time, the commercial fishery records date back to the 20s. There is data that did show that there was large whitefish present. They were using larger mesh sizes to catch large whitefish. In the 40s, 50s, after kind of the Second World War, there was really a lot of fishing pressure, overharvest occurred, and actually extirpated the walleye population and depressed the northern pike populations. As a response, the whitefish population structure shifted. Those commercial fisheries still continued, and they actually went down to 4-inch mesh size because the average size of the whitefish went down to kind of 400 to 600 grams, so kind of a pound, pound and a half was the average. That persisted all the way through until the 80s. The department took efforts to reestablish the walleye population and the stocking efforts in the late 80s and through the 90s, and then now we're seeing that population structure change in terms of the walleye population, predator fish, and the whitefish changing as well. So that's kind of in the last decade and a half where we've seen that shift. Most noticeably, the size of the whitefish now did go from the 500 to 600 grams. Now it's up to 1,900 grams. So now those fish are 4.5 pounds, 5 pounds, and even larger. So, and they've changed where they're actually present within the lake. So before, anglers could go and catch them in the shallows. They seem to be everywhere now. Those whitefish seem to be more predominant in the deeper water areas, and that's where commercial fisheries are operating and harvesting those fish. They're not in the shallow areas anymore as well. So yeah, we've seen those changes, and we've been tracking in terms of monitoring on an annual basis as well for population levels on the walleye as well as catch rates for pike and lake fish. We haven't seen noticeable declines on whitefish catches over the last 9 years. And we do have wide age class stabilities for whitefish populations too. So. But again, yes, we are seeing this something else that they are concerns. Whether or not it's linked to the blue-green algae. Initially in 07 was the first year we had a still since then it's been annual. There has been whitefish floating in the lake. Some years are more severe than others. 07, 2010, and 2012 has been the most significant in terms of numbers of floating whitefish. And our catch rates and on monitoring haven't shown depreciable declines in overall catch rates. It's been steady. And we're seeing recruitment still increase.
Al? Pigeon?
Yeah, Jay, I think I agree with the comment that if it is heat stress, that managing the cyanobacteria and preventing fish kills, that's two separate things. But I think it's kind of important to be sure that it is heat stress. I've worked on a lot of fish kills, and I've only seen one that I'm pretty sure was heat. What's the evidence that it's heat related?
I know the last 2 summers it's been the warmest on record that we've got in terms of water temperatures near the surface. Initially, we thought it was correlated with the blue-green algae because it was happening at the same time. The last 2 years, no, it's been well before the blue-green algae has bloomed. Again, whether or not it's acute or chronic to those levels, and whether or not it's these larger size whitefish, higher oxygen sensitivity, if it's the older age classes, because we do have them over 20 years of age as well, so it's, again, or is it secondary in terms of the stress related to the heat and dissolved oxygen levels that are allowing for secondary infections, such as the bacterial aerosol gills causing that. It's still unknown.
How high are the temperatures?
The data sondes that we deployed are reaching to 21, 22 at 3 meters of depth for short time periods where it seems to trigger.
That doesn't seem acute to me.
But that's mid-lake, 3 meters, whether or not it's in the shallow areas, again, we don't know if it's occurring in the shallow bay areas, which would be hotter than that.
You know, if you were saying 20, if you were saying 26, 28, let's say sure, it's obvious. But that sounds kind of great.
It does, well, even some of the literature is, there's ranges that range from 22 to 25 as the temperature thresholds for lake whitefish. You know, higher, obviously, of course, much more severe. So.
So what are you thinking it is, Al? Because
But we aren't
keep in mind
seeing
that it
it.
is only, like you saw from the photos, they're basically identical looking fish. They're all the same size and stuff, despite that there's, you know, a wide range of sizes of whitefish in lakes. They're all those large sized whitefish. It doesn't, you know, the last couple of kills that we've seen, they start well before there's any significant algal growth. As they were saying back in 2012, I was getting reports from people that are sailing across the lake saying, well, I can see right down to the bottom at like 6 meters depth or something like that. So it isn't related to the algal bloom. As I said, it might be exacerbating the situation once the algal bloom starts going.
And we're not even seeing any diurnal changes in DOs at that time.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't want to monopolize the agenda here. I just, if you're talking about objectives, it seems important to be sure on what you're trying to achieve. And those are probably two different goals.
Well, they are. They are
Yeah.
for sure. I think that the fish kills are definitely a separate issue from the algal blooms. And that if you're going to be controlling the phosphorus levels within the lake, that's going to control the algal blooms. It probably isn't going to bring too much in terms of the fish kills, but that's a different issue.
Have you ruled out pathogens,
We haven't.
like myxobacteria or something weird?
No, again, that's where we wanted to work with our disease lab. Brought us here to collect samples and time, if we could get staff out, collect fish, fresh enough samples to bring back, and then we can run a full suite of tests.
For a temperature-related kill, it seemed weird that you're just getting one size range of one species.
Well, in terms of those fish can range from anywhere from 6 years of age to 24. If we look at the distribution of ages and the form range.
You said
And larger fish tend to have a higher metabolic need, and so tend to be more affected by stressful situation.
Have the ambient temperatures changed in that area over time?
The ambient temperatures in the lake?
Have water temperatures, air temperatures?
The
gone up?
warmest years that we've had on record have been in the last 10 years or so, like that we've measured in terms of the water quality temperature.
So long-term climate data says something.
Long-term climate data, I've been looking at that. It's not showing that as much, to be honest, in terms of like the air temperature and stuff like that. I'm not seeing like a significant. I'm kind of in the middle of it right now. I'm looking at daily, monthly, annual, all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
So there's probably different pine lakes to see if we have really seen a big change in the last 30 years or so.
Yeah, like I said, I don't want to hijack your agenda, but I just want to be clear on what we know.
Yeah, I think obviously, as I said, I mean, it's kind of one other issue piled on top of the issues that they already have there with Pigeon Lake, but I think that focus on this workshop does need to focus on the reduction of the frequency and intensity of the blooms. Whether or not that's going to have any impact on the fisheries, probably not. And I think it is a separate issue.
Pigeon Lake isn't the only lake that is suffering for whitefish die-offs.
Yeah.
Collin Lake's another good example.
Ios again often has the large whitefish showing up in late summer.
Yeah, we've got Buck Lake that's half an hour to the west of Pigeon. Every summer there's whitefish from there. We've got Gull Lake in the same area. Again, not as prevalent.
Pine
as
Lake.
Severe.
Yeah.
Pine Lake, we don't have lake whitefish, so.
You know, a lot of our rivers are 22 every summer. And those are fish with a high metabolic demand.
Well, sensitivity to lake whitefish is obviously higher than the other sports fish that we find in these lakes. If we look at the Pine Lake, two falls ago, we did have a die-off there of walleye and pike. Whether or not it was related to conditions there, because it was the first year we had the consider loom as well. We don't know. Just after the fact, it's too late to collect samples to test.
There's a history of myxobacteria killing perch in Pine Lake for some reason.
Just perch.
Just perch. Mostly perch.
Some other comments on success. What, this will ask some of our American friends at the back, what sort of indicators are you looking for when you work with your groups? I mean, obviously you sign contracts for some sort of a performance, so by the end of the day, what is it you're promising or your win is going to be?
No, it's pretty variable.
Depends on the system.
Yeah.
I mean, the examples we use, the phosphorus levels are much higher than Pigeon Lake, actually, most of them. But I think all mine, I'm yours with too. Except for Lake Stevens, which is a maintenance dose of different strategy. Sometimes it's numerical on the phosphorus, secudisc, chlorophyll, or combo of those three. And sometimes it's on the severity and occurrence, intensity of the bloom. And sometimes it's just slice of the heck shape. Let's turn a corner in a different direction. The main thing is monitoring. You need a quantitative measure. And whether you set that as DO through the water column, comma of DO through the water column, temperature, pH, chlorophyll, phosphorus, both total dissolved, and chlorophyll, and then speciation of your algae. That's, to me, is the quantification you're looking for.
I think everybody bumped into has got a different objective. You're working for a park district, they've got, they're looking for aesthetics, they're looking for body contact, they're looking for not having a health threat, someplace that people, if they're not swimming there, might be launching a model boats or something like that. There's other places in the States where people are trying to match for a trophy bass fishery where the guys like me are pouring bags of fertilizer in all week. So really, you really got to go through the exercise you're going through, and these are the residents of this lake. What are the objectives that you really envision for this thing? And that boils down to, is the technology there to achieve them, and can we afford the technology that works for that lake? And that's what you have to wrestle with. You got a golf course pond that's 3 acres. You wrestle with all the same things as you would with a lake this size. It's huge.
But there are two things you're looking for. One is the definition of what is the pre-human existence of the situation for this lake that it did exist. So what is achievable? What is the background?
Yeah, Leo.
Then it's what is needed to maintain the beneficial uses at what level, regardless of the background. And then what compromise is politically and financially acceptable to achieve.
Ralph?
No, I'm okay. I thought that Chris summed it up really well. But Al's comments I was in agreement with. There's a little bit of the gentleman behind me that fits with my thoughts as well too. I'm quite familiar with my background is in Bell Patch, and I know what it takes to run a line from the top of Wizard Lake down in the haulers for fresh water coming in from the Saskatchewan. I think I can figure out what it takes to vacuum up the water and be able to separate the phosphorus out of that, the water back in, or replace the water totally. So there's no easy solutions here, but I saw a couple of things on that today.
I heard, just around lunchtime, I heard some discussions around sediment focusing. I'm wondering, Terry or Harry, if you've had experiences with folks digging big holes in the middle of lakes that all the sediment can run into that, and then you treat that one spot. Is there that much movement with sediment focusing, or is it more, you're talking about the lawnmower approach, right? I'm wondering if you could take
It's
advantage
pretty
of
tough
that.
in a large
In a
lake
big
with
basin.
a lot of fetch to have that truly covered.
Like the classic example is Liberty Lake over in, outside of Spokane, it's 1,000 acres, and they put a, you know, it's under the Clean Lakes program, they put a dredge system in there, and they run down cables, and when they,
Yeah,
you know,
cables.
they cut where they cut, and they didn't cut where they didn't cut, and if you would have done a, you know, bathymetric profile with